The healthiest man I ever knew died at 60. The longest lived smoked a pipe for 76 years and argued politics until the afternoon he went. I sat at the bedsides of more dying people than I can count, and I am telling you, what kept them alive past 90 and past 100 was not the diet, not good genes, not the clever specialists in the city. It was one quiet thing, and almost nobody guesses it, and most doctors will not say it out loud because it does not come on a prescription pad. I am 82. I have nobody left to keep it from. My name is George. For half a century, I was the only doctor for a stretch of country 40 miles wide, where the nearest hospital was a long drive over a road that flooded every spring. I delivered babies on kitchen tables. I set broken arms by lamplight, and more times than I want to remember, I held a cold hand while the breathing slowed and then stopped. When I was young, I believed the body was a machine. You found the broken part, you fixed it, you kept the numbers in line, and your patients lived. Then the years began to teach me, slow and with no mercy, that I had it mostly wrong. The first crack in my certainty was a man named Sam Whitfield. Sam smoked a pipe from the time he was 15. He drank a glass of whiskey every evening of his life and ate his bacon fried in lard. And he laughed at me every time I told him to stop. By my chart, I should have buried him at 60. Sam lived to 91, and he died after a full day of arguing politics with 3 other old men down at the feed store, the way he had argued with somebody nearly every day of his life. I went to his funeral confused. Something was keeping that stubborn old man alive, and it was not anything I had learned in school. So I stopped only reading charts, and I started watching how people actually lived. Who came through their doors, what they did with an ordinary Tuesday. And the oldest woman in the county taught me the most. Her name was Eleanor, but everyone called her Nell. When I first met her, she was already past 90, living alone in a white farmhouse at the end of Miller Road. I expected a frail old woman. Instead, I found Nell up on a step stool fixing a curtain rod, and she scolded me for not wiping my boots and made me sit down and eat before she would let me near her lungs. I asked her, the way doctors do, what her secret was. I was fishing for something to write down. She laughed at me and pointed at her kitchen table. There were 11 chairs around that table. 11, in a house where one old woman lived alone. I asked her why. She said, because on Sunday they are all full. Her children, her grandchildren, the neighbor boy whose mother worked late, the widower down the road who could not cook. Every week that table was full. She had not eaten a Sunday dinner alone in 60 years. Nell lived to 104, and she died in her own bed on an afternoon, after a morning spent telling her great-granddaughter how to keep a pie crust from going soggy. Now let me tell you about a man who had everything Nell did not. His name was Marvin. He was wealthy by our county's measure, sold his land for a sum that made the whole town talk, and moved into a fine new house with central heat and a garage for 2 cars. He was 68 when he came to me, and on paper he was in better shape than half my patients. Good blood pressure, strong heart. But Marvin was dying, and not from anything I could find with my instruments. His wife had passed 2 years before, his children had moved far away and called on holidays, and he sat alone in a house too big for one man, watching the road for cars that never turned in. He told me once that the hardest part of the day was the evening, that the quiet got so loud he could hear the refrigerator hum from across the house. He would set the table for one and then not be able to eat. He was 71 when he passed. The coroner wrote heart failure, but a heart can fail in more ways than the textbooks list. I kept those two side by side in my mind for years. Nell with her 11 chairs going strong past 100, Marvin with his fine house and his good numbers gone before he was 75. And slowly I watched the same pattern repeat in real kitchens and real bedrooms across 40 miles of country road. Let me be careful here. I am not going to sell you a pill or a powder or a special food. I never have and I never will. What kept my patients alive was something you cannot buy at any price. The longest-lived people I ever treated were never alone. That is the plain center of it. But it was not some vague, warm love. It was specific and daily. Think of Nell's 11 chairs again. Her whole life was built around being needed. She had to keep bread in the house because the neighbor boys stopped in after school. She had a reason every single day to put her feet on the cold floor. She was woven so tightly into the lives around her that pulling her out would have torn the whole cloth. Marvin had cut every one of those threads, not on purpose. Life cut some of them for all of us, but he had not replaced a single one. Nobody needed his bread, his advice, his help with a stuck gate. And I watched that man wind down like a clock, with nobody left to turn the key. The saddest part of Marvin's story is that he did not know what was killing him, and neither did anyone around him. He kept coming back to me, sure that some test had been missed, sure there was a tumor or a bad valve hiding somewhere he could fight, and I never could find it, because the thing eating him was the empty chair across the table, and you cannot biopsy an empty chair. I have wondered ever since how many Marvins fill the waiting rooms of every doctor in this country. People who come in with 100 small complaints, and what they are really saying, all the way down, is that nobody touches them anymore. Nobody needs them. The body sends up smoke because the house is cold. I think of Harlan and June, married 63 years, on a hard piece of land that gave them rocks for every bushel of corn. They were poor their whole lives, and they had buried 2 children. And still, I never met 2 people so woven together. He could not find his glasses without her. She could not lift the feed sacks without him. When Harlan died first, in his sleep at 89, I feared June would not last a month. But she did not fall apart, because the whole county came. The same people those 2 had quietly helped for 60 years mended her fence and brought the casseroles and sat with her in the evenings so the house would not be silent. June lived 4 more years, held up by the very cloth she had spent a lifetime weaving. That is the other half of it. You do not weave that cloth in a week. You weave it over decades, one small kindness at a time, until you are so tangled into other lives that you cannot fall far. I have to tell you about a failure of mine because I have carried it for 30 years. There was a man named Tom, a retired school teacher, a good one, but private, a man who kept to himself. After he retired, he pulled back from everything. He let his friendships go quiet the way you let a fire go quiet, not putting it out, just not feeding it. And one by one, they went cold. I knew Tom was lonely. I could see it. But I was a doctor, and back then I thought loneliness was not a medical problem. I treated his blood pressure and told him to lose 10 pounds. I never told him the thing I should have, that the quiet house he was building around himself would kill him faster than any number on my chart. Tom died at 66, alone, on a Saturday, and he was not found for 2 days. And it makes me angry, and not only at myself. We had a whole profession with machines that could count the cells in a man's blood, and not one of us had a word on any chart for the thing that was emptying him out. We would have moved heaven and earth for a tumor the size of a pea. A man dying of pure loneliness, slow, right in front of us, and we sent him home with a pamphlet about salt. Tom deserved better than salt. So if you recognize a little of Tom in your own life, hear me. Do not let the fire go cold. Feed it, even when you are tired, even when the small talk seems like too much. The small talk is not small. It is the thread, and the thread is the whole thing. There is one more piece, and it is purpose. The people who lived longest were not only surrounded by others, they were needed by others. There is a difference, and the body knows it. You can sit in a room full of people and be useless to all of them. The ones who thrived still had a job to do, even a small one. I had a patient, old Mr. Bellamy, who lived to 96, and the thing that kept him going was a dog. Not even his own dog, his daughter's fat old beagle named Duke. Mr. Bellamy's job, the one he gave himself, was to walk Duke to the post office and back every morning, rain or snow. When his hips went bad and his daughter suggested somebody else walk the dog, he refused with a stubbornness that frightened her, because he understood, without ever saying it, that the morning Duke did not need him was the morning he would start to die. He walked that dog until 3 weeks before the end. I think, too, of Dorothy, who ran the church kitchen for 40 years and ran it like a sergeant. When a young preacher once suggested, very gently, that they buy the rolls from the store to save her the trouble, she looked at him over her glasses and told him the day store rolls came out of her kitchen was the day they could bury her under the church steps. When her knees finally gave out and her daughter tried to retire her, within 2 months, Dorothy went gray and small and quiet. So her daughter carried a chair into that kitchen and gave her the job of telling the younger women what to do. And Dorothy came roaring back to life and bossed that whole kitchen from her chair until she was 94. Give that woman a job, and you could not have killed her with an axe. Take it away, and she nearly went in a season. We talk about retirement like it is a reward, like the goal is to finally be free of everybody who depends on you. But I watched what happened to the men who got exactly that, who finally had nobody who needed them and all the rest they had dreamed of. A great many of them were dead within 5 years. The rest they had longed for turned out to be the very thing that killed them. Now hear me right. I am not saying you cannot rest. Nell sat on her porch for hours. But there is a difference between rest inside a full life and rest inside an empty one. Same chair, same hours, 2 entirely different things. And here is the part I most want you to hold on to, because it means it is never too late for anybody. Her name was Frances. She came to the county in her 70s, a widow, moving into the little apartments behind the church. She knew nobody. She had no family left living. By everything I have told you, she should have faded fast. Instead, within a year she knew every person in those apartments by name, and their troubles, and their birthdays. She started a card game on Thursdays. She organized rides to my office for the ones who could not drive. She built out of nothing, in her 70s, the very cloth that other people spend 80 years weaving. I asked her once how she did it. She said she had decided, on the drive into town with everything she owned in the back of her car, that she was not going to wait to be invited. She said most lonely people are sitting by the window, waiting for somebody to come to them, hurt that the phone does not ring. And she had decided she would be the one who knocked. She would be the one who brought the pie. She stopped waiting to be chosen and started doing the choosing. And that one decision filled her last 20 years to the brim. Frances lived to 98. I have sat with a great many people in their final hours, and I will tell you what they talk about, because it is the most honest moment a person ever has. They do not talk about money. The savings and the deeds and the figures never come up, except to make sure someone else will be cared for. They do not talk about the job, the awards, the bigger house. All of it just falls away, like it was never real, because in the end, it was not. I remember a banker, a hard and important man in his day, who in his last week kept turning the talk away from himself and toward a fishing trip he took with his father when he was 9 years old. He could not remember last week, but he could remember the cold of the water and the smell of his father's coat and the sandwich they shared on the bank. That was the treasure he had carried his whole long life. What the dying reach for is people, always people. They ask for names. They want to know who is coming. And the ones who had spent their lives weaving that cloth, they had a room full of hands to hold. The ones who had not, the Marvins and the Toms, reached out in those last hours and found the room empty, and they had to make that crossing alone. The same death, two completely different things. I made a decision somewhere in my 60s, watching this happen over and over. I was not going to be a Marvin. I was going to be a Nell. I started saying yes to things I used to find tiring. My wife Helen and I made a rule that our door was always open and our table was always set for more than two. And the years since have been the richest of my life, not despite being an old man, but somehow because of it. So let me say plainly what 50 years of medicine taught me, the thing almost nobody guesses. The secret to a long life is not in the blood, and it is not in the genes, and it is not in the doctor's office. It is in the chairs around the table. It is in the people who are coming on Sunday. It is in being so woven into other lives that you cannot fall, and so needed that your body has a reason to keep going one more morning and one more after that. The people who live longest are the ones who are loved and who love back every ordinary day in 100 small and unremarkable ways. So if you have let some of your threads go cold, I am asking you today to pick the work back up. Call the person you have been meaning to call. Set out one more chair. Make yourself useful to somebody who needs you, even in a small way, even if it tires you. You are not too old. Frances was not too old at 70 with nothing, and you are not too old today. I am 82. My Helen is gone, and I miss her every hour. But my table is full, and my phone rings, and there are still people in this county who need an old man's opinion on things he is not even sure of anymore. And I mean to keep it that way until the afternoon I lie down in my own bed, surrounded, the way Nell was, with somebody's hand in mine. So go and set that table, open and ready for more than two. It is not finished for you, not yet. Come and sit with me again soon.